So one of the big storylines coming out of UFC 240 was that Joe Rogan's commentary wasn't very well received by a lot of people who were watching the event. I had some issues with some of the stuff that he was talking about, but there were a lot of people who really didn't think he did a good job here. I'll have to say there have been some other recent events where it seems like he hasn't quite been himself. Now, it's kind of hard to tell because it's not something I really focused on that closely, but it seems like this is something that's happened a lot more recently with him. I don't know if he's always been this way and I just haven't noticed it or haven't paid attention, or maybe I'm just paying more attention now, and I know more now as a fan, just because kind of over time you kind of tend to learn more things. So it's hard to tell if he's always been this way, and it's just something that I've always missed, or if it's something that I'm just catching on to right now, or if it's just something that's really new right now. Either way, there were three examples that people were pointing to of him just being way off base last night. So I'm going to talk about what those three examples were, give a take on where you could possibly give him a defense, and then say whether or not I think that he was in the right or in the wrong there. So the first one was the Jillian Robertson versus Sarah Frota fight. So I'm reading this off of an article from MMA Mania. Let me see who the author was. Andrew Richardson. And it says Andy L. Richardson. So if you wanted to follow him. But here are the arguments that he made. So he was talking about the Jillian Robertson fight. He was saying that she soundly outgrappled Sarah Frota en route to a second round technical knockout victory. The fight lasted just 9 minutes, and Rogan spent a majority of them and asked a question in the post-fight interview talking about Frota's jiu-jitsu accolades and how special they were. All the while, Robertson was working past the guard and denying submissions with great skill, work that was largely ignored until the end of the bout. So the point that was being made there is there were a couple of unorthodox submission attempts that Frota had put up. One of them was a reverse triangle, and one of them was an arm triangle from bottom of half guard. And in both cases, Joe Rogan was making it sound as though they were close, so that they could potentially become close. And people were like, "Wait, why? What are you talking about? Those are low percentage submissions. Why are you acting like this is close to ending the fight? Why are you gassing up Sarah Frota so much when Jillian Robertson's doing so well?" And I think, as far as if we're being fair to Joe Rogan, first off, if you're just looking at the belts, I believe Sarah Frota is a black belt and Jillian Robertson's a purple belt. Now, Robertson's also a pretty good wrestler and is very effective at using her jiu-jitsu and MMA. So when you have a purple belt take down a black belt, generally an assumption is going to be that the purple belt's got to watch out and there's some traps that they have to avoid. So for Rogan to commentate the way he did, I understand that. Also, one of the things is when you train a lot, especially if you've trained at a lot of different places, there are some submissions that you tend to see as low percentage that they'll get hit every so often. So that inverted triangle, actually, we have seen that inverted triangle in some high level MMA. That's a submission that Liam McGeary hits a lot. He's actually hit it on Tito Ortiz, among other people. So we know at this point it's a submission that works if you hit it right. So for him to kind of raise his voice, raise his tone when Sarah Frota was going for it, I think that's fair, even if she wasn't able to lock it up. Also, the arm triangle from bottom, that's one that you'll see every so often in the training room. I've maybe seen it like a couple times in the 8 years that I've been training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it does happen every so often. So it's one of those things where if you see someone attempt it, you got to at least acknowledge that it's happening, even if you don't think it's gonna even if you don't think it's gonna get a submission, you kind of have to acknowledge that the attempt's there, because in the rare case that it does happen, you don't want to act like, oh, there's nothing there. Oh, and she's tapping. You kind of have to acknowledge that something's going on there. So for the inverted triangles, don't really have an issue with how he handled that. With the arm triangle from the bottom, he was saying that it's a tough one to finish. You have to be pretty strong. So he was saying, yes, there's something here, but it's probably not going to work. And he was right in that way. So I really didn't have too many issues there. And it's also worth noting from a jiu-jitsu standpoint, a lot of times, especially with chokes, you'll get into like a general position and then you'll have to make some adjustments there to finish. And it's worth noting when someone gets to that general position and has to go from there. So a good example would be a triangle. So let's just say I have what's called shoulder guard, where I have one arm in, one arm out, and I'm around basically in the triangle position, but I don't really necessarily have your posture broken down. I haven't pulled your arm across. I haven't started to cut my angle, or depending on how you finish, you can either finish by cutting your angle, or you can kind of take it straight on and pull down on the head. So I haven't gotten to those points. I just have the shoulder guard. If you're commentating a match, or if you're commentating a fight where I have shoulder guard on someone, you have to treat it as though, okay, he's got a real attempt at a triangle here, even if I haven't done all the other details that are really going to lock it up and make it tight and force the tap. So he was doing that when Frota was getting into what was effectively like an inverted shoulder guard. So I have no issues with that there. Don't really have too many issues with him making the statements he did about the arm triangle from bottom. So for the Frota Robertson fight, really didn't bother me. I don't think that there was much of an issue there. The only thing that might have bothered me a little bit is that I had a bet on Robertson, and he was making it sound as though Frota was a little bit closer to, or a little bit more competitive than she actually was. But to me, really nothing too bad there. The second one was the Cyborg versus Felicia Spencer fight. That one was worse. So here is the description that was put in this MMA Mania article. It says Rogan may just die holding his breath while he waits for Cyborg to get tired. Every time Cyborg walks through the cage, Rogan talks about her weight cut and how it's likely to affect her in the cage. Nevertheless, she can fight for 15 to 25 minutes strong, pushing a hard pace and ripping brutal shots. Last night was the latest example, as Rogan claimed Cyborg looked exhausted at the end of the first round. A round Cyborg violently dominated, followed by 2 more rounds, which Cyborg violently dominated with no change in pace or demeanor. So in this one, after the first round, Cyborg had clearly won that round, and she won it dominantly. She was breathing out of her mouth and kind of taking some big breaths. So to say, hey, this is something I'm noticing, Cyborg is taking some pretty big breaths here. She does appear to be tired. I think it's fair. But it seems like he didn't realize it was a 15-minute fight and not a 25-minute fight, and he was making it sound as though that Cyborg was not going to be able to keep up with Spencer for the rest of the fight, and that clearly wasn't the case. You probably should be aware that's likely not going to be the case because you've seen Cyborg fight some long fights before, including a 25-minute fight with Holly Holm. So for him to make it sound like Cyborg was fading and that Felicia Spencer was going to get her, when in reality, Cyborg just had to catch her breath and keep fighting and ended up winning every single round and doing so pretty dominantly. I mean, it just seems like he was pretty far off base there. And the fact that Dana White hasn't been all that positive towards Cyborg lately, saying that he thinks that she's afraid to fight Nunes, and then to have Joe Rogan during the fight pretty much just downplaying Cyborg and saying, she looks tired, she looks hurt. If you were to make an argument that the UFC was conspiring to make it look as though Cyborg isn't really that good anymore, to make her value less in the market now that she's a free agent, that between Joe Rogan's commentary and between what Dana White's saying, it'd be hard to find evidence to the contrary. You would just have to make an assumption of whether or not that you think that's true or not. So I think in that case, his commentary didn't do him any favors in the Cyborg fight, and I think to criticize him for it would be fair. The third example is in the Frankie Edgar fight versus Max Holloway. So at the end of the third round, Holloway had been damaging Edgar pretty badly, ended up hurting him, and when Edgar was hurt, his mouthpiece had fallen out. So one of the things that tends to happen in these fights when the mouthpiece falls out is that a ref will wait for the first stop in action, and at that moment, he'll stop the fight. He'll put the mouthpiece in the guy's mouth, and then they'll continue the fight. So Holloway had Edgar hurt, sees the mouthpiece out, realizes that if he kind of slows down and just tries to pick his spots, there's a good chance the ref's going to jump in and give Frankie his mouthpiece back. So he just keeps chasing after him. And as a result of him being a little bit more aggressive than normal, he ends up getting taken down. So at this point that he's taken down and Frankie Edgar is hanging onto his hips and trying to secure a more dominant ground position, Joe Rogan's saying, hey, looks like Frankie Edgar is about to steal this round here. There's a good chance he might steal this round. So 2 ways of looking at this. First way, and the way to be fair to Joe Rogan, would be maybe he's not saying he thinks that Edgar wins that round, but that he's saying that there are some really bad MMA judges, and a dumb MMA judge would think Edgar won that round. Do I buy that? I mean, I guess I'm sure there's a really shitty judge out there who might agree with that, but if you're going to be saying something during that point in the fight, I don't know that putting up hypotheticals about the worst judges out there is really the route to go. And obviously, if we're talking about in reality how it should be scored, no. If you get rocked and you're getting beat on your feet the entire time, you get a takedown with 30 seconds left, you hang on to the guy's hip, and you hardly land a strike. No, you did not steal the round with that takedown. So if you took that as Joe Rogan saying, I think Frankie Edgar may have earned this round, that's absurd. If he was just trying to say, hey, maybe there's a shitty judge out there who'd give it to him, I mean, I guess technically there may be some shitty judges who would give that to Frankie Edgar, but there are a lot of things you could comment on the fight at that point. That's the first time that Frankie Edgar got a takedown. You could talk about what he's trying to do to secure the position. Like there are a lot more things to talk about than what some shitty judge somewhere in some commission might score that fight just because of the takedown. I just don't know that was worth bringing up. And because he was talking about what a shitty judge might see, it ended up rubbing people the wrong way. So I think there's reason to criticize him for that one as well. So as a whole, I think there are more cases where Joe Rogan saying some stuff where it just kind of like hits you and you're like, wait, what are you talking about? Why are you saying that? I think this is happening more than usual. So I don't know if this is something that's happening on purpose, what the issue is. Obviously, he's got his hand in a lot of other ventures, but he's always had his hand in a lot of other ventures. So I don't know that there's anything new there, but I would just hope that for the pay-per-views coming forward that these types of events don't come up as much where Joe just seems to be completely off base about something. But we'll have to see. And obviously the UFC has been trying to push for a lot of their fighters to be getting into commentary roles. So if Joe is talking about how he doesn't want to do this a whole lot longer, the quality of his commentary seems to be going down. I think it may be getting to the point where we're going to have to get used to guys like Dominic Cruz and DC more often because Joe might not be around for a whole lot longer doing this.